TDS had released a lot of events in the past, and 2 big events in 2024, with one of them done in a short amount of time while also pushing out content for some reason. TDS events have gotten bigger and higher quality, well, visually for the most part, throughout the years, but there will still be some events that are good or mid. I will rank them based on my experiences in casually playing those events. Since I have played every event in TDS, even if I was unable to beat them, I may forget a few of those experiences since it's been literally half a decade, or I may have a strong opinion of them. Basically, this is my ranking alone, so of course there will be bias since this is subjective. Feel free to make your own list in the comments below though. The tier list is in the description. Anyways, let's start off with the first event, Sword Fight on the Heights. This was TDS' first event and it rewarded the Gladiator, which I remember I found the tower pretty bad at that time. This was just a simple event and I was just a simple casual player at that time. Somehow I managed to learn a freezer technique, where I replaced freezers to use their freeze drop ability to freeze the boss. I barely had any DPS towers, so that was all I can do in the event while being carried. I don't think it offered much replayability at that time, so this is just alright. Area 51. A Roblox sponsored event. I never thought it was a Roblox sponsored event when I played this, since it was just a reference to the Area 51 raid. The raider boss had the ability to kill towers on sight, but even with that, the event was overall easy. Killing towers isn't particularly an interesting mechanic when only a few tower dies. Even if we were pretty tight on cash, pretty alright. Halloween 2019 event, oh boy. I've tried this event plenty of times but I was unable to beat it, never even reached the final wave either with randoms. I remember a friend told me he easily won with military base. I didn't know how he did it, but all he told me was to spam the tower. It ended up not doing much. Come to think of it, maybe it's cause he was abusing the military base bug, which was unknown at that time. I'm not sure if it even exists either, and I don't know how it worked at that time. Gameplay wise, this event was mostly spammy, encouraging splash towers and then single target towers for the final boss, and jacks. This event was the first event to offer exclusive skins but in crates. Pretty decent event. Winter 2019 event. This event was literally cool. The enemies had pretty cool gimmicks and were pretty tough. The Krampus can cover the entire map with his Frost Storm ability and would get super close to your base. This event was tough and I remember beating it with randoms in a trio, and that's probably how he got really close to my base. Not only does the event offer a new tower but also skins and emotes that you get for replaying the event in the ticket shop. Quite a solid event with good gameplay and decent mechanics, which makes it really good. The spring event. I don't recall much and I quit TDS for a while after this period. I couldn't grind myself to getting all bunny skins, which I now regret. It was a pretty easy and simple event. I don't think there were anything interesting other than mechanics and alright gameplay. Decent. Halloween 2020. The second longest event in TDS. After seeing the game completely different than what I remembered, I went back playing the game. This event was pretty difficult because it adopted some of hard force mechanics like cash on death and 25% inflation. Would you look at that, it's my own clips. Yeah, this is when I started recording some events to archive them. Because the gameplay was pretty tight, meaning we're basically forced to use certain towers to beat it, makes this event feel mundane to play. Especially with the battle pass encouraging you to play it over and over again. This event was mostly simple in the end, along with mediocre gameplay, which makes it alright. Frost Invasion 2021. This was supposed to be released in 2020 but stuff happened. This event was just refreshing after the update draft TDS did after Halloween. Only to realize later down the line that it is also gonna end up like Halloween, funnily enough. This event was mostly simple. This was the time when I started being active in the Discord community during the pandemic, since I barely had anything to do, and was the only way for me to not get completely isolated. I recall replaying this event plenty of times. It was pretty fun preparing for difficult waves like Unstable Ice and Frost Invaders, and getting jump scared with an insane spam of Frost Invaders, After the game just sent a handful of them, the surprise of difficulty spikes. There are also some exclusive skins which were pretty alright. Overall this is a pretty good event. Solar Eclipse 2021. This is when I started getting actually better at the game. This event dropped 4 campaign stages that are basically game modes of the event, with each of them balanced pretty nicely, while going all out with the last night featuring an interesting boss fight gameplay while remaining difficult. A well-executed unique event at that time. My only complaints were how the bosses lack some simple abilities, like how Umbra only has one stun ability but a base damaging ability. Besides boss gameplay, the waves before it was well balanced and interesting. There were some waves on night 4 you had to prepare so you wouldn't die from them, like clankers, cursed horses, headless jacks, etc. It's not just night 4 however, the other nights also have their own difficulty spikes. This event was very fun. I quickly completed its battle pass and thank God I did. Since a week after night 4 release I got hit with a strong typhoon that cluttered my province, and cut my electricity for a couple of months. Having a full battery was a luxury in that situation. The Solar Eclipse skins from the battle pass were pretty good and it even gave us a deluxe grade. This is truly my best TDS event. Duck Hunt 2022. This event first introduced the Defend the Center game mode and was mostly experimental. Unfortunately, this didn't give any tower and only brought skins which were mostly mid except for a few. The gameplay was completely different compared to other events and your traditional TDS game. It was refreshing and fun. It wasn't difficult but that's probably for the best. Since in design, naturally, this doesn't require much thought on placements. You just place your towers near your base since enemies will just attack you head on in all directions. This also makes range look more valuable since most of your towers are at the center, while the boss is quite close to the edge of the map most of the time, where enemies spawn. Additionally, I love the ducky designs and also their gimmicks too. They look silly and cute. Overall a pretty good event. Violent Night 2022. Not this Violent Night. This Violent Night. Utilizing DDC again but with a few additions, such as base regeneration. Every boss has the ability to damage the base at a distance. They don't move in the tree and kill you. The mini-boss will start damaging your base at a specific position. So you still have a time limit to kill the bosses, and if you manage to kill the boss slowly, well the next mini-boss won't be forgiving. But unlike the final boss, it's all random. He can choose to eat a cookie or shoot an ICBM missile at you 3 times in a row. For some reason. Funnily enough, enemy spawn is also RNG since most of them, for some reason it can happen where most of the enemies spawn on either short paths or in one of the longest paths. I may be crazy from trying to duo this in NST. RNG is the main reason why people hated this event, which is understandable. More on gameplay that isn't just on bosses. It generally felt the same as Duck Hunt except in the evil elf waves, where it just sends evil elves once in a while. And unlike Duck Hunt, the enemy gimmicks were less interesting. The skins in this event aren't interesting in my opinion but the tower is pretty fun mostly cause I like spawners. This event is overall decent. After Violent Night, there wasn't an event after for a while until Tradition, a Halloween event. Lunar Overtures 2023 is one of the first events to actually show lore. Well, I heard Violent Nights could be the first one since it was supposed to be a campaign event like Solar Eclipse. Judging from inconsistencies in the leaks and trailer, it might be true. But this event, advertised itself as the best TDS event, turned out to be a slop. Because of how many bugs and how long those bugs lasted, the gameplay of Act 2 and especially Act 3. Act 1 was pretty decent. It was simple and introduced this map-changing mechanic. Simple gameplay. Act 2 was the same but with gimmicky enemies, but it was mostly tedious and uninteresting because we had to wait for the enemies to die or revive themselves. Why is there no skip button? The boss also couldn't even kill you. Act 3 was the spotlight of failures and disappointment, even the narrator knows it. It was Defend the Center again with a barrier mechanic that makes late game easier by funneling enemies close together and walk on a longer path. Before boss waves it was alright though uninteresting until sock puppets showed up. When wave 14 begins, that's when all hell breaks loose. It featured two-hand boss, they do the same thing. They can stun, summon, and kill towers. The killing part was insanely overlooked and didn't do much really. You can't damage nor target this boss normally from towers. The only way you can damage it is by using spotlights with batteries you gathered starting from wave 1. Problem: the spotlight does not work at a distance. And the horde of wave 14 was insanely overwhelming at that time. TDS handled the problem poorly too. They tried nerfing it first but somehow ended up buffing it. And at the end of the event, it was still mostly buggy. This event tried to be overly ambitious and wasn't realistic with their schedule, which is the reason why it failed. But if you ignore the problems in this event, it's a pretty fine event. But who to say you can actually ignore them when you need to go through those problems to get the event tower? Which was super OP and surprisingly gimmicky. This event was kinda alright, I guess, since there was a time period where Act 3 was at least possible. After 1 month, TDS got themselves together in an attempt to redeem themselves to make the Krampus Revenge event. This event utilizes a lot of existing features but executed it in a way that it felt different at least. And also added unique mechanics to Krampus, which is making him jump on different lanes. The gameplay of this event was kinda fun, and encouraged different tower types like Splash. When you do use Splash towers, it can get very satisfying. The boss fight was cool, if you don't speed kill him so he can actually show off. I like how it throws presents to summon enemies on all lanes. The quest system was pretty cool too, wished some newer events used it. It has the potential to make battle passes less repetitive depending on the execution. We know it's most likely not gonna be well executed. Overall an easy event with decent gameplay and mechanics. This is really good. The Hunt event, a dedicated Roblox event. It was just another simple event with simple enemies. The only difference with these enemies is that the wave spawns progressively adds more attributes, and can turn them to hidden, or lead if the wave feels like it. The spammy enemy gameplay looked weird, but very satisfying if you brought splash towers. This event didn't offer much other than one simple skin. It's pretty fun to play with hardly any issues, so I'd say this event is decent. Brainrot event, I forgot that this was an event. Let me try to remember. Instantly bad. The classic event is another quite simple event but with 5 maps. It only gets interesting on the last one featuring triple major bosses, if you skip every wave. This event felt alright gameplay, but it's the same as the other maps so it gets repetitive, and there wasn't anything interesting before the final map. This event forces you to use a specific loadout which limits the fun. Well, it is for Roblox event users after all. Unfortunately, this still drags it down. Lowest of the alright tier. Might put this too bad since it did ruin the game with bugs outside of the event, but that's completely unrelated. Oh, I hardly had any footage of this event in my files. Hexescape 2024, this is when TDS starts getting ambitious again like Lunar Overtures, but more decently planned as it didn't end up being as chaotic as Lunar Overtures. However, it still had some problems which dragged the event down. The main problem is mostly optimization, especially when Night 1 came out. The gameplay throughout the nights was pretty fine. There were economy problems on Night 2 where you'd barely max towers. The night was still doable and hard, which was nice, but it was mostly hard cause it felt tight. The computer objective was pretty cool though, although it didn't make sense why it nerfs conservers HP to a reasonable amount. For Night 3 the map looked weird and looked lazy. The layout of it basically feels like this. The map layout is obviously easy, in return the enemies were made to be harder so they often have nimble attribute. Before the nimble fix, Night 3 was incredibly easy and uninteresting before the boss. After the nimble fix that's when it felt fine for the most part. The boss fight at first was very confusing. We do not know how this would kill us after making the first loop. Seeing it suddenly going after our base after ignoring it for the first time just felt unfair. And we had no time to counter it. After learning this, the boss just felt the same as any other enemy. Kill it quickly before it goes to your base, but the experience was functionally different. Most of its abilities were just for show, global stun, and incredibly weak summon ability. All I'm gonna say to this boss is that it's visually cool but functionally uninteresting. 2 abilities that can stun every tower aren't interesting. I guess the only interesting bit is its random teleportation mechanic, which forces you to move your towers to the other side so you can chip its health faster. The battle pass was terrible and uninteresting for the most part. The only cool stuff I got from it is mostly emotes. I barely used any of the skins, since I found them uninteresting to me. This event rewarded 2 event towers, but one of them is terrible and I don't bother using her. Unlike Harvester, it had a cool interaction with farm. Almost forgot, this event has its own consumables. The most notable one is pumpkin bombs, which can make your game harder, which is fun. Overall, it's a pretty good event. Please donate. I barely experienced this event. This was still another easy and simple event. No event tower, and outshined by Hex Escape. There wasn't anything wrong with this event other than being quite average. It has cutscenes and voice acting though. But this wasn't enough to make me wanna play. I don't even have any gameplay footage of this event since I couldn't bother myself to. I don't think there were any problems in this event other than being generic, which is why it's just alright. Operation Ice, for Frost Invasion 2024, the most recent TDS event. At first sight, this instantly looked better and more gimmicky than Hex Escape, and it does, but gameplay-wise, it felt mundane. The gimmicks of the event were poorly executed, which allowed us to ignore them completely to increase our chances of winning, and not having to bother moving towers. You could say it's the player's fault for ruining its experience. But the player is simply just finding ways, as in strategizing to get to their cool event tower. And it turns out that defending at the back proved to be a viable method. Don't forget that TDS is also a strategy game and part of the fun comes from it. Though that doesn't mean I can always ignore it, since not everyone in matchmaking is gonna defend at the back. This frost bombardment. Is this what we're supposed to call this mechanic? Oh, it is. This mechanic is interesting. It literally kills your towers if you don't move them as the game stated. Somehow I wouldn't notice it at first still because of what's happening around the map. The only problem about this mechanic is that it's predictable, so you could choose to not place towers in specific areas that get bombarded, so you wouldn't have to bother about it. The gameplay of the event heavily relies on long-range towers since the map is wide and long. Especially when fighting against Frost Spirit, when he could choose to jump away from the outpost and heal himself to full HP. You will need Pursuits or Gatling Gunner to be able to damage this guy. A simple jump to either side is still quite devastating to non-long range towers as well. This boss fight was very gimmicky and felt alright. The waves before the final wave are incredibly uninteresting though, with no difficulty spikes to surprise you till maybe wave 37. This feels worse when the event takes ages to finish. The rewards of this event is pretty nice, pretty solid skins compared to Hex Escape, decent consumables, and alright towers even though I do not use them. The battle pass is very forgiving in this event, making regular games viable to grind so you're not too forced to repeatedly play the event. Additionally, it doesn't take a while to finish the battle pass too. This event is pretty good, but since I really don't want to replay the event because of the duration, and how it felt uninteresting, drags it down to a pretty decent event. Thank God it only took me a few games to get most of its logbooks. I think I forgot one more event. It's Metaverse. This event is insanely generic, but it was just there for the Roblox event. No new enemies other than Phoqus. There's not even a unique map. It's completely understandable that there's nothing interesting here, which is why I put it in bad. That's my entire tier list. Most of them are around mid-tier. Since most of them didn't impress me much and I wasn't able to make memorable experiences with them, I mostly rated these events based on gameplay and overall experience. Other factors are just a sweet extra for the event. Anyways, I used the tier list in the description below. There are a few events that aren't added there, which are the April Fool's 2024 event and Please Donate event. Anyways, comment down below what's your top 5 TDS events. I did not expect this video to take so long. But thanks for watching if you reached this part.